Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor for Brains V Brawn II. I'm your host, Shannon Guss, here to talk about episode 6. What an episode! I really, really love this episode, and to talk about it, let's bring in my co-host for the third episode of every week. It is the Miles to my AJ, the AJ to my Miles. Help me out here. It's the great Mike Blue. Mike, thank you for being here.
I'm trying to figure out which one of us would be the better poker player, but it's like asking which one of us would be the better brawn. Like, it's just a real race to the bottom, considering how expressive we both are. Shannon, I might be looking like Kent or PD by the end of all this, because I've just been ripping my hair out at all this stuff. This is a reference that will be lost on you, but the real ones know. I've seen some comments from people saying that Australian Survivor Brains vs. Brawn 2 is the Big Brother 26 of Australian Survivor, and it is so crystal clear to me. We are playing like wild card whack-a-mole, where it's like, oh, Nash and Kent, what the hell are they doing? They're so self-destructive. Now that they're gone, surely the season will stabilize. And then like Allie had her brief moment when she popped up last episode. And now here comes Max out of nowhere. Turns out when you burn this man's hat, he's going to burn his own game in the process.
Yeah, it's like a curse that exists on the island, and when people leave the island, it stays, and then it assumes a new host.
Exactly.
Or
Yes.
many hosts, actually.
It's like a smile or it follows. There's like a malevolent spirit that exists out there.
Yeah, I said last night that this season had some of the worst gameplay I'd ever seen, and today, Max, you have the mantle. I think that Chizy is often harder than what would be if we were doing the opposite, what we used to call the doof of the week on Survivor South Africa coverage in 2019. Yeah, Max, what were you thinking? I mean, trying to work out what Max was thinking.
I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I love this so much. Again, as someone that is not as strategy forward as the person that I am talking to, like, I have so much appreciation for all these people that are just trying to do stuff for no particular reason, at least from our perspective, and to have people react to that and make their own moves only for those moves to get overwhelmed. I totally agree with you, Shannon. I would go so far as to say this is my favorite episode of the season so far.
This was so good. This was so good. This was classic good Survivor. I mean, and this is why, firstly, I'm so happy we have episodic recaps, because it was like, everything we knew yesterday is now irrelevant. There are two new groups, and this is what Australian Survivor does so well. We're in the pre-swap. This is what people complain about with the new era and the little tribes, like they don't have as much space and don't go to tribal council 4 times. If they do, they're a disaster tribe with like 2 people left. Here we are, 4 tribal councils into this, and we have not only warring factions, but they're 2 new iterations of our previous warring factions, and they're fully going head to head, and there's a twist. And the best part about it is that the twist didn't decide the day. I think that would have been a little frustrating, is if, like, the graduates, which I love, by the way, if like these scrappy underdogs had gotten the numbers and then had been like foiled by this huge twist, but instead the opposite happened, where Max somehow got the substance was in him. I haven't seen the substance. I don't know if that's what the substance is, but this substance on the island was in him, and the force of that caused him to send one of his own numbers back to camp. Not even himself, not even to save himself. We'll talk about what we think Max was attempting to achieve.
The method to his Maxness. I love it.
100%. And then the 5-4 becomes a 4-3, and they win the day. And it was so cathartic. It was so cathartic, and I loved it so much for the underdogs to win in this way, and for Miles, who's been so badly treated. I just want to say, like, it's not on, actually. Firstly, the way Kent had his own issues with Miles, but you don't talk to someone that way. And Max hears his name. Okay, if you can hear your name and then be awful to people, Miles should be awful to everyone. Like, Miles has been so pushed down, and I don't want to use the B word, I don't want to use the bully word, but I really don't appreciate calling him out as a rat in front of everyone and going on and on and on about it. And for him to have this win, I was thrilled, and I freaking loved it.
Yeah, I mean, this was such a fun way, and I will say, Shannon, I know obviously due to production scheduling, they had anticipated the swap coming next episode, but they really picked the perfect time. And maybe we'll talk about this later on. It's like how we could prognosticate what happens, because, I mean, this was sort of like the pinnacle of the Brains Tribe 1.0 for me, in that moving forward, had they continued in this way, it would have been, I think, a very easy, clean sweep for the graduates, as much as a lot of these people on this particular tribe like to kind of just wake up and say, yeah, I'm going to do something different now. It does seem like this group really was holding as the new majority. And then over on Brawn, we really honestly don't know or don't care about anything that's going on over there.
100%.
But
we don't even talk about it in the recaps anymore. It's just full Brains all the time.
Exactly. But what I am obsessed with this vote, Shannon, is like how much there were these prevailing narratives that started the post-immunity challenge period and how those end up winning out. Like, imagine when they're going to get to the swap and Rich sees Allie
I
gone,
know.
he's going to say, like, mission accomplished.
I
All
know,
my
it's so
very
funny.
subtle nods paid off. Max did it. And what makes it all so interesting as well is even at Tribal Council, like, we'll talk about Max's one of many confounding choices to come back immediately to camp and be like, okay, just so everybody knows, I'm sending myself and AJ out so that we can get rid of Miles. And then when he decides to send Laura and Karin, but is still trying to promote this Miles narrative, like, Logan doesn't have to act confused. She is very properly and sincerely confused by what's happening. It was a wild series of events where, like, at one point, I feel like at least half the tribe was talked about at some point or another as a possible name. There were targets flying around everywhere. There were real plans and fake plans, and then the fake plan became a real plan at the end of the day. And I totally agree that this was the perfect twist in that it was the straw that stirred the drink, but it didn't flavor it in a weird mixed metaphor. And that, like, it didn't come down to, oh, so-and-so got screwed because Max did not play it the suboptimal way. Thank you, Max, for, like,
Yes.
not screwing somebody over by sending out 2 of their alliance members. Thank you for shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, the whole episode, I'm like, well, the graduates are screwed because they're going to lose 2 of their numbers. And I thought maybe AJ's idol might come into play if he might
Yeah.
play that for like a Miles, which we can talk about, which he doesn't play it for him. Obviously, knowing that they have the numbers at that point. But it did come down to Max bafflingly screwing up the twist where he had so much power. A couple of things are interesting here. Yeah. So Rich is going to see this and be like, bomb squad. And Allie herself is like, the guy's got me. Allie was so late to the plan, and she gets brought into the Zara vote really late, and they're not even talking about their alliance. Like, Laura is talking about it with Allie, and like no one else is. Max is actively targeting Allie, so I don't even know how much Allie knew about what the new structures were. But yeah, even Allie thinks it was, in the bomb squad winning, which is funny because Max has lost out so hard here. Like, but he was targeting Allie at a
Exactly.
point.
Like,
So,
that's the
yeah.
that's the wild thing is that, like, Allie wasn't a number to him as much as she was a number to Laura and Logan, which is why they put their foot down about
Yeah.
not doing it. And I think as much as you say, like, okay, everything last episode was kind of like rewritten, I do actually think a lot of the stuff from the previous episode carried forward to this one. And, like, maybe a bit of the canary in the coal mine of Allie's boot here is the fact that she was brought in so late, which is just like, it seems that people really can't trust her with information. Like, because,
I wonder why. I wonder why that might be justified. Can you think of any reasons
yeah, it
that
might
one
be
might not
because
want to do
she
that?
approaches someone on the beach and tells them to their face, like, hey, when I tell you something and you react that way, you shouldn't be reacting that way. Like, she is, like, Karin put it really well. She is so black and white in how forthcoming she is. And look, that might be something valuable to have in, like, someone to keep with you because you can always kind of clock what they're doing. But we kind of experienced this a bit, especially now with, like, the extent that Laura and Logan were keeping Rich in, which is like, this stems all the way back to me to Sherry Beetham in Survivor Karamoan when she's like, I've got to keep Shamar close by me. He's going to be my Philip. You cannot assess your goats on day 2 of the game, especially Australian Survivor. It is way too long of a game. And what do we hear so much from the graduates in this episode? From Karin, from Zara, from Miles. I want to work with people who aren't emotional, who aren't inherently strategic. And I don't think it's coincidental that that's what wins the day over this, like, incredibly chaotic, emotionally driven group. And not to say that voting with emotions involved is necessarily a bad thing. But what is also so interesting is that one of the things that leads to the schism of the coven is the fact that, Laura and Logan believe, oh, these two are not doing what we say. We want to make they're 2 wild cards, they're not going in the direction that we want to. And their game got blown up ultimately by getting in bed with an even bigger wild card.
Yeah.
The grass is always greener. I'm sure at this point they're like, God, who wouldn't have done that to us many times over? Karin and Zara. They would have told us to our faces what they were doing and let us in ahead of time.
Yeah, let alone the fact that they don't have the numbers. Laura's put her foot down without the leverage to this point because they don't have Kaylin and they don't have the numbers. Like, it has frustrated me that they've been calling them, the Karens and Zaras, insufferable. I'm saying that. Inflexible. It's been insufferable to me that they've been calling them inflexible and stubborn when I felt like that's what Laura has been to this point. Like, every single time she doesn't get her way, she feels like it's like an imposition. Whereas I think if anything, like, no, actually, like, you pushing your agenda on a 2 to 3 or maybe like a 1 to 4 even, if anything, like, is extreme. And that's really frustrated me to see that get flipped on its head with a group in the graduates who are just so much better at building the alliance compared to the chaos of the other side who don't even have a name. And that just shows, look, the cohesion and the fun of building a name and having a code, like, they just had it done. Like, this was so much of a better place for Kaylin to go, which we can talk about as well. But it is so interesting that Ali becomes a target, which we'll talk about, because yeah, for Max, who wanted Ali out, it does seem like things were achieved, but they weren't. Like, the loss, swap notwithstanding, is the fact that he's lost Kaylin as numbers, the fact that they lose the vote and they don't
the
have
end
the
did not
numbers.
justify the means.
Yeah, exactly. So it was definitely a loss, and we can talk about all of that. But I mean, for Max, let's get the first. What was he thinking? What was he doing?
Okay.
Can you explain to me what he was doing by sending Karen and Laura in one of his own numbers out of tribal council?
So the only thing I could possibly think is that he wanted to still create some sort of smokescreen in case Miles had something. That, like, I wanna make Miles feel, which is but that doesn't make any sense, because, like, again, his stated plan, right, was like, I'm sending myself and AJ out, and then we're gonna get rid of Miles. Which, if Miles had something, would have flagged him to play something anyway. Like, where this plan fell apart, obviously, the crux of which was who he sent out, but not even in the form of, like, Laura. The second that he didn't do what he told everyone he was going to do, that's the second that they're like, okay, then something's different now. Like, okay, something else is afoot, which then begs the question, why did he tell everyone in the first place? Like, there certainly is merit sometimes in just stating what you're going to do up front and sort of giving yourself that power. And, Max sort of giving himself like that implicit immunity for the afternoon, right? By trying to seed out to people, yeah, I'm not going to be at this tribal council, so, like, don't even think about targeting me, especially when he finds out that his name is in Miles's mouth. We saw this to a certain extent with what Haley did with the 50-50. We'll do rock, paper, scissors.
Let's not put those. Let's not.
Oh, they're two sides of the same coin, Shannon. But I honestly am still trying to puzzle it through. I guess my assumption would be that Max thought he had enough numbers. Yes. The Laura thing still makes no sense unless he really wants to set up the smokescreen of, like, I want to make sure it comes across like we're not working with them, right? That, like, it's still subtle and underneath the surface that I've still got my guys, but they don't know about what's going on with me, Laura, and Logan. But that also doesn't make sense, because if Miles is gone, the only guy that wouldn't be in the know would be AJ. And, like, what does that matter?
Yes. So I kind of understood the first plan that he told people. I didn't agree with it, but I understood that at least even better than what he did. And I guess that plan would be that I'm immune. At least if you send out someone on your side, if you send out your own number, I'm immune, and AJ is gone as a target. So the presumptive next boot, because AJ is such a shiny target to, like, the Logans of the world, becomes Miles, as we even see. And now they have to vote out Miles, and he thinks he has enough numbers because he has a wrong read on, like, a swing like Kaylin. Because at that point it would be what? So he wouldn't be there. So it would be Laura, Logan, Kaylin, Ali would be the 4, and they would be against Miles, Karen, and Zara. So he thinks that he has the numbers of that. But it's still pretty slim. Like, I feel like at that point, maybe you try and invest in having, like, the most possible numbers of tribal council. Anyway, that wasn't the plan, but I understood it. I didn't agree with it. Then, to do what he did, I think what he was trying to do was shock everyone into pushing a Miles vote. Now, firstly, I would say shocking your allies to try control them is not the way I personally would build allies. I don't think it's a way to build long-term bonds. That's the first part of that. The second part of that is that he said Zara. He said Zara to
when he's like automatically, oh, if it's not Miles, yeah, it could be Zara. That's fine. Unprompted, he says
he
that.
He said that name. He not only said that name, he said to us in confessional, like, he wants Miles out, like, basically, like, as petty revenge, but he wants, like, he's saying for the bomb squad, Zara ticks a lot of boxes in terms of getting out a woman and getting his allies, like his new group that doesn't have a name, to the non-graduates, the high schoolers, to the students. Yeah, I guess the students.
GEDs.
The students who didn't become the teachers, the masters in this, while he is a teacher. The students in this episode, that would get, gain a lot. If he really wants Miles, just push Miles a little bit more. Like, don't then go, like, offer Zara. I think he was trying to unsettle them, to push a vote. And it does become Miles in that moment instead of Zara. So,
I mean, he's able to succeed at least, like, he gets half his goal in that he's able to at least tell the people that he is closest with, do this.
But
And
do
I
it
guess
earlier.
to his
Like, and
point,
don't
there's
do it in that way.
and also like we just and he obviously I think the key point here is that he does not understand the effect that he has on people. And that like Logan was very, very unhappy with Max just walking unprompted, not briefing this to the Alliance ahead of time, which again is so the opposite of the Coven, where they are so upfront with each other, almost like destructively so, being like, no, I don't want to do this because it's not in my own agenda. It's the exact opposite with Max, where he's like,
Yeah.
it's not in my agenda, but I will tell you it is until the moment that it's not. And then what are you going to do? And so maybe he just took the fact that like they immediately recovered and moved once he approached them and was like, oh, this is the real plan. They were not going to complain of why the hell did you go rogue and do this thing without consulting us ahead of time. So he thought, great, I can do this again and it's no problem. And like, he strong-armed it, sure, but the key mistake is that he
He
picked
sent
the
out one
wrong.
of his own numbers.
I
Numerically,
mean,
yes.
that's an obvious one, but the other one is like, it seems like from our perspective, he ends up targeting one of Kalen's untouchables. Like,
Yes.
he's the key person, and I guess this is something that maybe Max does not necessarily realize.
Clearly not.
Yeah, it's like we don't know where Kalen would have gone. It would have been possible that like if that Kalen feels like he is fine working with the students if it means getting rid of Azara or even of an ally, but like Miles would have been a name that was too far for him.
Yeah. There's a few things here. I mean, I do think like he's thinking maybe Laura's too set on Zara. Like if he takes her out, he can like push his agenda more. But again, he said Zara, so that's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is maybe you think like obviously you use this to build a coalition. Like you should use most advantages, especially something like this, which is something that has to be used immediately that everyone knows about. And importantly, is going to be used halfway through tribal and can then be responded to, right? It's not something being used in the voting booth. Like you're going to do it. So whenever they find out about it, they're either chatting at tribal council or they're chatting at camp. So like, don't tell the other group what you're doing, sure. But if your concern is, I want to tell my group, but like, what if there's a leak? Kalen would be a leak. Firstly, you have bigger problems. You don't have a number in terms of the leak, but also I'd rather try and build it. And if there's a leak, it's like they will find it out eventually. If you send out people and they know they need to use an idol, they're going to know that anyway. It's going to be at tribal council and they're going to be prepared for that eventuality regardless. So there's no reason not to use it to build. So whatever, we can't get to the bottom of what on earth Max was thinking. But I do think in terms of the target, Miles is not the target because Kalen was never going to vote that way. But I think that anyway, this is just a way better group for Kalen. Like we at least see his relationship with like an AJ more.
Exactly.
And it's funny because they just assume they have Kalen, and such huge credit to Kalen, who's a swing here, unrealized by seemingly either side. I think that like because he's been playing up the way that even like Ali talks about him to Braun, like they think that he's not there to play the game. He's been doing that actively. We know that. And they don't realize that he's in so much love with both sides that they don't even realize how much of he's even a swing. So I thought this was a great group for him. Again, it's a way more cohesive group. Do you want to be on the side that shocks their allies to control them, or the side that has a fun name and is giving code words to each other that the other side doesn't even realize they're playing into a tribal council? Like, it speaks for itself, and I think was a great choice for Kalen and played so well. And you might say, okay, but Kalen seems like a fifth here and a fourth in the other group, but the other group is going to bring in a Rich, firstly. And also being a fourth in that group is not good anyway. But Rich is going to come into that, and he's not even really a fifth here because he's a trio with the guys.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
A great group.
Yeah. Like I think that he feels like if it came down to the graduates for whatever reason, that Rich and Miles would take his side. That like Zara and
Miles and AJ.
Miles and AJ. Sorry, that they're too much of a pair. That they had this whole coven thing going on. So clearly, like their relationship
trio is great.
Yeah, so like I think it was 100% the right decision. I mean, to your point, it's obviously going to be influenced by the edit because we don't see Kalen's connections at all with any of the people on the other side. Maybe there were relationships, maybe there was something going on with Max, especially in lieu of Rich, that made Max feel like Kalen was with him. I mean, what's also really interesting about Australian Survivor that is tougher in New Era Survivor is that when it comes to like the perception of being the GOAT, I mean, this is the conversation that we had with Andy last season, right? Was like, okay, he's making all these really cool moves, but is it ever going to overwhelm this image that people had of him on day 3 when he had this big Matt Chat meltdown? In a game like Australian Survivor, there was so much more time and there was so much more votes to it that, like, if Kalen maybe made this move at like the final 9 instead of when there were 9 people left in the tribe, it might have been too little too late of like, what are his chances of winning? I think Kalen really upped his stock here. And I don't think it's in a way that's like Kalen's now the new number 1 target. No, there's still going to be focus on Miles. There might be some focus on,
AJ.
on AJ. There'll be focus on maybe even Karn and Zara for like breaking away from the Coven and doing something else. And so like, I think Kalen's still in a really good spot. And the perception could still be from his perspective, like, no, he's just a happy-go-lucky guy who was picking up coconuts until his good buddy Miles told him to vote this way. So I think Kalen could still play up this perception a bit while also being firmly ensconced in not only this 5-sum, but what he thinks is a 3-sum within the 5-sum.
There's so much good work here that's going so undetected. I mean, Puya and I got to the fact last night that we felt like had Ali been sent out of the game at a proper vote, we felt like it would have coalesced into the group that it becomes of this 5. And now I guess it makes sense that happens anyway with Rich out of the game, and it just kind of, we swap 1 for 1, we're out of that tribe. So it made so much sense, but the fact that people don't know this, the fact that they think that they can bring Miles to a Kaylin without knowing what we know, that Kaylin has tried to save Miles before, that they have such a good relationship, even the way that Kaylin at the end was like, I was worried for you, Miles, like that relationship and the dignity and respect that he's treated Miles with, which we shouldn't even have to be talked about because that should just be human interactions. But the way that Miles has been treated compared to the way that the AJs and the Kaylins and like now the Zaras and Karens have treated him is honestly just a breath of fresh air. And I love Kaylin so much for that. And I just knew that he wasn't going to be voting for Miles. And I think that was obviously a poor target, but they don't know that. And you're so right in that we don't see why the other side think that Kaylin is with them. And he's obviously putting in that social work, but it seemed really clear to us that we've seen this social side of it, but he's doing that clearly with everyone because that's what they thought. And I think that is a huge credit to him. Conversely to that, I think Ali is a target here for the graduates is such a good target. The first part is that it's so viable that the other side is also kind of wanting to do it. So I think that in terms of just getting the numbers over, while, obviously like Logan is a much bigger threat and they've had their issues with like Alora, those are interesting options. I think giving Kaylin a woman, he said that he wanted a woman out of the game, I think makes a lot of sense for a swing vote, and maybe they sense a little bit more that he's the most on the out, and that's a credit to them as well. I also wonder how much for Karen and Zara, how harsh they think it would be to take out like a Logan. Like that is a huge move. And I think Logan might be a bit more socially insulated, as much as Karen does say she goes from 0 to nuclear, which was a bit concerning. But that would be very harsh.
Was this not the conversation we just had last week with what AJ did of like, do you have enough social currency to make this investment at this point? It might have been the same case where like, maybe even AJ was like, now we gotta pick our time and place for Logan. Now is not the time to do so. And as we talked about, Ali is just such an easy name to float out in that
so easy.
Obviously
everyone
the men
wants her to go home.
Yeah, the men have been bristling against her. She has provided numerous reasons. And now even the women are like, not even we can trust Ali. So it's interesting in that, like, yes, on paper it was 5-4, but it kind of was like 5 to 3 to 1 in that Ali was not necessarily in, like we said, on the ground.
It depends who you ask.
Yeah, like she was like gonna go with whatever Logan and Laura were telling her to do. And so she was like loyal to that extent. But otherwise, she's not someone that was clearly brought in on like the inner workings of a lot of these things. And so it just makes sense as like, if you're trying to bring people on board, it's kind of a mutual interest to the point that Max, again, wanted to target Ali, who was a number on their side.
Yeah, I feel like I have this has been almost a theme of the season. We've been talking about this since episode 1 of like a Candy versus a Noonan for someone like Nash, like viability versus like completely unseating the other side. And I think a lot of the times we say like, just go for viability, especially in like such a slim numbers game like this. Like, while it is unfortunate to let bigger threats like a Logan and Laura get to a swap, I do think that, again, it's not as harsh a vote to obviously vote out Logan. Like maybe the girls think they can work with Logan down the track, especially if the game is shifting up. If you vote out Logan, she's obviously gone, or even Laura, that's probably like a relationship completely killed. So this is a little bit more amicable to move forward to a possible and probable and then now definite swap. So I think there's something in that as well, that it is really something everyone can get behind, and it's so super viable for a swing like Kaylin, and kind of for everyone. It's so forgivable that like Max, who screws up so badly and loses so hard, wanted the target himself. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing this early. Is it the biggest possible win? Probably not. For AJ, it probably feels like it. So there are definitely wins there. But I do think it's a win without necessarily torching relationships that you might want to work with in another like 3 weeks from now. And I think that that is great. But I will say that Laura's going to do one thing, and it is attach herself to the most destructive person on the beach and just go to bat for them. And it is now becoming a trend.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the bomb squad, but she really is like Jeremy Renner in the Hurt Locker, that she's like coming through with the big gear being like, I can dismantle the bomb. I'm the only person that can handle these destructive personalities. I mean, maybe it's just that like witchy energy that feels like she can attach herself to this chaos. I mean, it'll be really interesting as well. On paper, Laura could certainly be like, well, listen, I didn't vote for Miles. Like, maybe I wasn't brought in on this, but obviously that's going to blow up as soon as like Logan is going to come back. Obviously, we see in the next time on, to say she is furious will be an understatement. And so I think it's going to end up coming back very quickly that they broke off from the Coven. And this was so captivating to me. I love the arc of the Covenant, if you will, that both pairs realized essentially at the same time that they had to break things off. And it does show like, look, we talked about this before, Shannon, I think back in like Blood versus Water, about like, why does the community enjoy alliances so much that are, made up of women, that are made up of minoritized communities? Just because it's not something that it's an ability to give power to those that are less empowered in our society in general. But this also, to me, is a huge reminder as to why it is so tough to maintain those relationships. Because when you are in an alliance, the first and foremost reason that you should work together are mutually aligned interests. It should not necessarily be around shared traits that exist outside the game. Those are certainly good bonding points, but they're not always going to translate to strategic bonding as well. And we saw that first and foremost, where like they're getting together in the first day and they're saying, yeah, this would be nice. This would be really fun to like run to the end as queens right now. But like, again, something about the Black Widow Brigade is that they all had the same targets in mind. And even they had their moments. They had their moments where they were targeting their own and Amanda. And so
or targeting Amanda's boyfriend, and they left her out of it. But then she came back well from that.
But it became abundantly clear as these days wore on that like they are just on fundamentally different pages, that they wanted to protect basically different guys on the side. And so there was going to be an inevitable point where it broke, and it broke in such a fun way. I'm happy to see more of Karin and Zara as well, just because, again, since the narrative in the first few weeks was so based on Laura and Logan, because they were the ones making the decisions, to give those two the agency as well to split off and to make their own side deals, and to basically say like, well, shit, if you're not acknowledging our suggestions, let's find some people that are. Like, that's what you should be doing. That's absolutely what you should be doing in Survivor. Now, maybe not as like hard-headed as all these people of like my way or the highway. I mean, Laura says quite literally in a confessional, like, I need to work with people who, think strategically and will also do what I say. So they're not necessarily going to be like, all right, we'll work with you, AJ and Miles, but only if we get rid of this person. But to see the way that they get on with as the graduates is night and day compared to all these deliciously dramatic Coven conversations.
Yeah, I did love how Zara was like, well, we kind of did that too. After Karin's like, well, guess the Coven's done. But the thing is they were reacting to Laura's clear, rich priority. I think Laura was blowing up the Coven last episode had she had the chance, and they're reacting to that. So it's not so simultaneous. I think Laura was going to get the jump because she doesn't get the opportunity. Now everything's blowing up at the same time in this episode, and they were good to read that. And I guess everyone's jumping ship from this at the same time, and that's a credit to all of them that no one, except maybe Ali to a degree, is staying on board. Again, I don't know how much Ali understood about what the structures of what were happening, although she has told Zara's name and is going for it. So she must know that the Coven is done. But I feel like she was kind of less in the machinations of this, to the point where before even the advantage is like they have the advantage, so they know they need 5 votes. They're talking about their 4 with Kaylin without Ali. So she's really not like a part of this. And I feel like they were kind of going in with this minority number, maybe just assuming they'd have Ali's number. But yeah, I thought this was really interesting because the thing is about alliances like a women's alliance, where sometimes we see like, groups that come together on like one specific trait. That can work. I mean, the reason that we have a diversity initiative is because people go to what is familiar. And I think it is more powerful when it's like a marginalized group. As an example, the Women's Alliance, where we've seen other groups come together in this way, whether it's like racially or culturally. Like, I think that can be really important, especially when you see representation that's not usually there. Like, I think that is a connecting factor, but it works to various degrees. Like, is it something where you're connecting because you think you should, but then it's not playing out in your personalities? Or is it something where you really do connect over this trait? And for the Coven, it really feels like it's the former. And look, it's literally like an alliance of numbers and an alliance of comfort. Like, it was so clear how much more comfortable these new working relationships were, at least for the graduates. I mean, the students have their own issues, but that was really evident that it wasn't there. It wasn't there for them. So yeah, I mean, this was 100% right in terms of breaking there. Like, it was really becoming completely untenable. They had their own interests that they weren't willing to compromise on, and it's been like a week of that. So it made so much sense. And then in terms of the target that the students have had, so it went between obviously Miles. Well, first was Allie, then Miles, and then Zara. I definitely think Zara was the best target they came up with. I feel like Kaylin, obviously, they've said like has wanted a woman out in terms of like maintaining the male numbers and some of the power he might have in the bomb squad. So that made sense. He's never going to vote for Miles, so that was a terrible target. And then Allie was like actually a key number for them. So the other side's targeting her. So like I feel like you shouldn't be doing that. Like, again, you don't have the numbers. You don't have the numbers even with her, but I certainly wouldn't be like giving her up as like a fifth of 9, or what becomes the fourth of 7th. Like, you're at 7. Are you really going to need her? So I thought this was really interesting as a target. I did not agree. And I thought also so fascinating from Max. A couple of different ways. The first part that he's so out on Allie, like he's targeting Allie. Allie is saying Max is her buddy and giving him the information about Miles. So that's how much she's in with him. And he really doesn't want to work with her, I think, to his detriment, when, again, you don't have all the numbers you need and you definitely need to start accruing them. Again, even with Kaylin, you should really have her. So he was really willing to throw that away. So I thought Allie. And the other interesting thing about Max's targets is how much he was protecting AJ. I thought this was such a credit to AJ, because AJ was not nearly as in as Max was into this relationships. AJ is throwing out Max's name as well and talking about it with Miles, floating the name. So the fact that Max went out of his way to protect AJ when Logan wants that, and is like, not just because I think he's so much going for Miles, but like also he said he was okay with Allie and Zara. Like, he really protects AJ when AJ's name has been out there, and he does not get the same from AJ. So that showed an imbalance in this relationship that was unfortunate for him, but is a real credit to, I guess, how important AJ was to Max and how much protection he has, even people outside of his alliance.
Or even this idea of like kind of the crater that Rich left behind, in a manner of speaking, right? That like, I'm still trying to piece together, like, when it came to that bomb squad deal, like who was truly in on it versus who wasn't. It was clear that Rich and Max were in on it. I mean, AJ was also the one that leaked to Rich in the first place. This like, which is also very interesting considering like what we talked about in last week's episode of like, oh, this is what AJ should do with Rich, and then literally does it hours after he should have done it to get Rich on his side, to get rid of Logan. But that, maybe he's super grateful to him about that. But yeah, it is really, really interesting. The choice in Zara, I mean, it's almost the opposite of what we were talking about as to why Card and Zara should not have gone for Logan, right? And that in the moment, Logan maybe thought she had some of that social currency to be like, no, we could get rid of Zara right now. It's a much bigger target than obviously someone that gets talked about a lot. I mean, this is the first time that we heard Zara's name being brought up in this season. So like, it would have come out of nowhere. But I think, especially if, no, I'm trying to remember in the episode, we know that Card and Zara were certainly speculating that Laura and Logan were doing something on the side. Were the L's thinking about the opposite as well? Because that would be also a reason to go after, is like, all right, if she's trying to do what we're doing, we gotta nip that in the bud. Let's get rid of somebody dangerous here. Or was it just more so a like, as they espouse in confessional, like, I didn't like the way she reacted to us trying to keep Rich for the umpteenth time?
Well, yeah, I think they were frustrated with her personally. And then it's interesting the way that it evolved is that I think that she just became a name people could settle on, because Max isn't wanting to do AJ. They're not wanting to do Allie. Actually, what ends up happening is that Logan is the one to say Miles. You think with Max's vendetta that he's the one really pushing Miles. Again, I don't think he needed to stump his alliance into controlling them. The first person we see say Miles in a proper way, obviously he's like has the smokescreen of Miles, but he's saying Allie. The first real target that we see from the side that is Miles is from Logan saying, okay, if it can't be AJ, it should be Miles, because she doesn't want it to be Allie. At that point, I feel like Max should just be like, yes, and then just send out 2 members of the opposite side and then just agree on this. Like, the crazy thing is that I feel like the only thing I can possibly think for Max is that he's trying to stump his alliance to not take out Zara. But I feel like he pushed Zara and they were pushing Miles. So if you want Miles, it feels like it's coming more from them. So it felt like they gave up Zara because it was something that Max wanted over Ali even more than Miles. So what? How do we get to the point where that's the thing? I don't even know. But yeah, I just thought that was really fascinating. It felt like Zara is more something that they could agree on. So it definitely doesn't feel like something they need to like unseat a tribal council. It feels like, why don't you just all agree on Miles before tribal council and then use the numbers you hope to have and could have had you sent out 2 members of the opposing alliance and then win the day.
All right, so let's talk about
abound.
this. Okay,
Yes.
so let's try to put ourselves in this cozy sweater that Max is wearing, and let's say that we are forced for whatever reason to continue in Max's actions and not tell anyone the true intentions of our plan at tribal council. So if you are sitting there and you're about to cause chaos and your goal is to try to force everyone's hand to get Miles out, who are the 2 people, in your opinion, that you should send out? I have some thoughts, but I'd be intrigued to hear what you have to say.
The 2 people to send out, I don't know, like AJ so he can't be targeted, and probably Zara.
That's what I was thinking as well. Because
but you don't even need to force the hand. Logan said it first. Anyway, but yes, with that assumption, I would, yes, those are the other 2 possible targets from that side. So just because then what that leaves from that side, Karen, Kaylin, and Miles. There's no question that Miles will be targeted. It's not going to be Karen, her name hasn't been said, and it's definitely not going to be Kaylin, who they think is on their side.
Yeah,
it could be Ali, I guess.
I mean, that could. But
I think we were past that.
Yeah, I think at that point it's like, and I don't know how much Max is like, yep, I'm putting everything on the line to save Ali. So
no, but well, that's the other thing as well, is that he wanted Ali. So if you don't want it to be Ali, don't push and vote for Ali. Like, that solves that issue. So
if I get rid of all of my possible targets, then I'm forced to pick this one. It's the perfect way to like stave off temptation in a manner of speaking. No, I agree. That's what I thought of as well. Of like, listen, if you're trying to force Miles from being like the tertiary target to the primary target, just get rid of the other options. And so, yeah.
But also, if you want Miles to be the target, when Logan says Miles, just be like, yes. Just, yes, Logan offered it. Do that. Do it with your allies. And now I'm going to, just generally, the fact that he didn't share the whole plan with his allies the whole time is like the most asinine thing I can possibly think of. Like, the fact that he blindsided his own alliance and wanted them to vote for him and then lost out. It's so bad. It's the kind of thing where it's like, I only just watched the episode and I know it's bad, but I'm sure with time, more layers of the badness will come to me and only more of that will seep in over the next coming days. I'm sure that is also true of it.
And
you know what I mean?
the irony of it, Shannon, is, and no offense to Max, I think Max is such a fun character.
I mean, a lot of offense. That is
proven.
What were you thinking?
He has proven he is the most new chaotic character of the season that I hope continues. But it is very clear that we are giving more thought to his actions than he did. I would not be surprised whatsoever if either in an interview or just through like, happenstance that happens on social media, he reveals like, yeah, the plan was Zara, but then on the Walksy Tribal Council, I thought about doing this instead and thought it would be fun, and I just decided to throw the nuclear bomb in the middle of that. Like, I think there's a very real chance that's a possibility.
It is a curse of covering Australian Survivor with often people who don't know the game so well. And I know I'll do my thing. I did it last week. I spiraled. What were Morgan and Kate thinking? Have I spent more time thinking about that than them? Yes. It's just a true fact. And like, I can tell you for a fact, because my great friend, Chrissy from Blood vs. Water, and I love her to death, and she would admit this herself. But even on the deep dive, I could tell through months of analysis, I've been like, what would the vote like that? Why was it like that? Was it a one-person split? Et cetera, et cetera. And Chrissy was like, I just screwed it up. And I was like, well, I lost sleep over it, Chrissy. And back and forth we went. And I think that is my curse in covering Australian Survivor. So painful. Absolutely painful and a well-deserved loss, unfortunately, on a target that Max actually wanted out. But it was a loss. Someone who...
Guys, that's the wild thing, is that he got rid of the person that he wanted.
He originally wanted. It's so painful.
So
I know. I hope he feels worse than he... Like, I hope he's still upset about what happened.
No, he's not going to be upset at all. That's the thing, is that
No!
Did you not see the next time he's like smiling, being like, well, that didn't work out, but all right. And especially, I think the swap is going to be, like almost teaching the
Yeah.
wrong lesson, like being a clean slate,
I
and they'd be like, well, now I
know.
don't have to reap the
I
consequences of it.
know. Because the massive win was that they won the numbers and then they immediately swapped. Like that's so unfortunate
Oh,
because
I
he's like
love it.
he should be in danger, but he's now out of the situation.
I
Someone
love it.
who
I love
yeah,
it though because it also again informs me how like twists are not always get out of jail free cards. Like if they are forced upon
it kind
production
of
of like,
was.
I
Yeah.
mean, but that's the thing though is that like people have to make decisions. Good twists should force people to make decisions. I've always said this, and so it goes to show that if it's put in the hands, and again the irony of Rich, who gets what he wants, but had he given the advantage to somebody else, it could have gone in a completely different direction. Like, even if he gave it to Kalen, like, Kalen would have been able to at least let people know what was going on, his intentions prior to this. He gave it to what was both on paper the worst decision because Max decides to cause absolute mayhem throughout the afternoon into the evening, but then also at the same time give him the win and that like it got accomplished what Rich wanted at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm trying to think about what I thought the advantage was yesterday, and I kind of think I thought that Rich could just play it himself, like tell like the two he could take out two people himself is maybe what I thought, and it wasn't that. And then the person he gave it to had so much meaning. Like had he just given it to Laura, who's on the side
Right.
of Max, like they should have the same outcome. But like, yeah, there's no way she screws that up. You know, like just that alone is really the issue
Yeah,
there.
she would have
Yeah.
sent out Card and Zara and be like, "See, ladies, we're still in it to win it. I made sure that the bomb squad didn't take you out. Sorry that Miles had to go, by the way,
Yeah,
or AJ in
100%.
that case."
Yeah, it probably would have. It probably if at that point when she has the power, it might be like an AJ. It depends, I guess, who's talking about it then. But they're offering Miles anyway. Whatever. I know that side would have won. Why? Because they would have had the numbers because of the 4 to 5 minority they had. All four would have been kept at tribal council. And like again, even if you think you have Kaylin, it's an untested group. Just keep in all the possible numbers you have. Like Laura's such a secure number for you. Like I think just make sure if anyone from your group is going home, it best be you to make sure you're immune. Like, and even then, like keep your number. It's what level math is Max teaching to his students? Did he say he was doing like year one, year two?
He's a
Because I think
primary
it's
school
already
student,
beyond.
yeah.
Yeah, it's beyond him. I'm worried about the math he's teaching to these young kids because it's
Ah,
really it's that simple.
they have calculators on their phone. But again, this is what
You don't need it. You just need fingers. Actually,
yeah.
43.
And this is
Yeah,
what
that's
I just love about this season is that like people are boldly confident about these plans that they are trying with these things that they are saying so audaciously and not necessarily thinking about any of the ways that may be perceived or any of the realities behind it. And to me, that is the perfect formula for reality TV. It is sticking your neck out there, peering over the cliff, not realizing that gravity is about to take you over, right? You're like, I can fly. It's fine. My feet are on the ground. Oh no. Oh no, I'm careening right now. Well, probably shouldn't lean too far, but at least I got a nice view of the bottom.
I have so many questions. Okay, so I was gonna someone who actually thinks about plans probably as much as I have. I want to talk about a couple of people and how they wielded these advantages. So first is AJ. AJ has an idol, and I thought again might be the one thing to save Mars. I thought an idol might come into play. He doesn't play the idol while assuming he has the numbers. He's putting trust in the fact that Kaylin's with him. It's obviously a good read. Did you think he'd play the idol possibly even with that in the fear, or did you feel like he'd have trust in that? And another more important thing is if the right two people are sent out, and say Karen and Zara are sent out, should he be playing the idol on Miles at the point where they're actually now pretty screwed?
Well, first off, it's a question as to the seating at Tribal Council this season, especially, is more key than ever, considering how much is being whispered. AJ was all the way at the end. Would he have picked up that Max is whispering to people saying, vote out Miles? Because again, from AJ's perspective, assumingly from what we've seen through the edit, he assumes that Max is coming in with the Miles plan anyway. So like if I'm seeing him whisper, now I'm like,
Yes.
okay, has it changed from Miles to something
Yes.
else? Could it
The double
change
negative.
to me? To the
Yeah.
point about should he have played the idol on Miles? I don't necessarily think so. I don't think it's confirmation bias in hindsight being like he didn't necessarily need it. But I think that AJ is somebody who, again, is trying to play up this position of like, I'm on the bottom. I think you need to hang on to that idol to use for yourself. Because, like, if it's the worst case scenario and Miles does go out, now at least you have something in your pocket. Like, you literally have an
Yeah.
ace up your sleeve that you can use if you truly feel like you are a dead man walking that now nobody knows about. You could wield a really fantastic amount of power next time as opposed to like if you do use the idol correctly, let's say protect Miles, and then someone like an Ally or someone else goes out, the numbers are not going to be guaranteed next time, and now you're missing an idol as well.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, like, had he sent out two people, like, you think you're coming back to a 4-4 even without Miles. Like, if Miles goes home in that situation, let alone the fact that you could swap and are about to swap. So, yeah, if Karen and Zara are sent home, you at least are coming back with Kaylin, Karen, and Zara to a 4-4 and a possible swap. You may never go back to Tribal Council, and they won't. I think that's the thing. I think it was really good in the situation to not play it for Miles or himself, I guess, in the fear that it's just like a tense, again, untested situation and there's like chaos happening. But he's trusting his numbers, and that's great. If two of his allies are sent out, I think you definitely don't play it on Miles. Just again, I think an idol at that point with so much left to go in the game is more important. It will protect you if you go back to a tribal council anyway. And again, if you have a 4-4 and an idol, that could be the ace in the hole as well. And again, you probably never even get to that point, but you also have options, and then you probably are going to a swap with an idol. So I think you never play it on Miles as much as I really, really love this duo. I wonder if Karen and Zara are sent out, if he plays it on himself. I think it would be ballsy in that situation, knowing his name has been out there, knowing they just lost two numbers and definitely don't have the numbers. It would be ballsy not to play it on himself. I think that might have happened, and that would have been conservative but incredibly understandable. But I don't see a world where he plays it on Miles. But it was really, I think, really good for him not to play it today and not to have that fear and trust in his numbers. And now he secured a majority, and he has the idol as well, let alone the swap. But I think that was really good.
Yeah, I think that basically if Karen and Zara get sent out, from her perspective, he probably thinks it'll be 50-50, right, between him and Miles. And I think poker is all about hedging the odds. You're not allowed to count cards, but like trying to assess what the percentages are and reading people. And so I think AJ in that moment, more than anybody, would have been like, I might want to hedge my bets here and just make sure that 50% becomes 0% by playing this on myself.
Yeah, and wouldn't make sense to play it on Mars, who's the other 50% of that. Like, at that stage, like, if anyone's going to be safe, it might as well be me. Like, if I'm that scared that they have the numbers, even if it's like an 80-20, I best be safe. And if Miles is going on the 80%, again, I'm probably swapping, or I'm coming back to my 4 with my idol. Maybe, very unlikely, if we lose more challenges before any swap, and I'm dealing with that situation then. So, yeah, okay. And then in terms of someone else playing an advantage, let's talk about Rich. Rich and his... So firstly, I thought it was so interesting how Braun was so wary of Rich. There have been... The precedent is that someone in the second week goes across and is coming back to the other tribe.
I love the meta.
Kelly had the sabotage element. So they were like, don't play him in the challenge.
Yeah, like it's so interesting to see, because obviously we experience this a lot in New Era Survivor, because they primarily cast people that are huge fans that have especially watched the recent seasons. But Australian Survivor casting, I feel like outside of the first 5 minutes of every season, we actually don't get a lot of references to previous seasons in Australian Survivor. Now, part of it might be casting, to the fact that maybe some people that make up the cast are not necessarily out and out, knowledgeable fans of the game.
Well, now we know they saw at least the last season. That's good. Yeah,
exactly. But it's so interesting because even like Jerry as well had that, like, there was not a sabotage element involved, but clearly the initial idea was like, it was like, oh, you're going to be a spy and you're going back. And so, again, this is why it's good to have a super fan in charge sometimes, is to have Noonan just immediately lock that shit down and be like, nope, we don't trust you, Rich. Return to sender. If they're not going to do it, then we're going to vote you out should the chance arise. So again, not too much going on in Braun. I hope that there's a secret scene eventually released of like how Braun reacted to Rich coming back to camp, because that's always a fun one for me, is like, if you're the winning tribe, there might be some meta aspects where if you're a super duper fan, you're like, well, it is episode 5, so maybe someone will get sent over. But like, just the abject shock of like, oh, you're with us now? Oh, okay, sure. Like the fact that there was obviously a lot in this episode, but they just opened up with like Rich sleeping with them. It's like, oh, all right, well, we kind of just skip past the good part, it seems.
Yeah, it's so interesting as well that I hadn't even considered the physical aspect of sending Rich out yesterday. And I don't think that could it obviously didn't, because he's their strongest guy, but I don't think that they could really think about that, because he's like putting his hand up to do it. There's no real other good option. Like, it worked for the girls and what they wanted to do, but they did lose someone who was important, at least in like the reward challenge. Like, he is their strongest guy. You don't know when you're going to swap. You might need that. And then they sit him out of the immunity challenge, so it doesn't matter. And to be fair, Rich has been like antagonistic with them in challenges, so maybe in the like kind of like big obstacle course immunity challenges, not having him isn't terrible. But it, like, from a physical standpoint, it is interesting that they would do that, but I just don't think they had another option. But so then he comes there, no one trusts him, which was so interesting. And I do think Nuna's probably doing a lot of heavy lifting on explaining Survivor to people. She already explained what a split vote is. We already saw she gave the history of that in my mind. And now again, she's having to explain like the history of these like sabotage twists and like probably even what a non-elimination is, depending on how much everyone read the rules on the Brawn tribe. Why didn't Rich just show them the scroll? That's what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Unless he wasn't allowed to, which I would really hate from a production standpoint. But if they're all wary, be like, hey, the big twist is that I have this. So the first thing is I definitely want us to win. Like I want to control my other tribe from here, give this advantage to them in the next tribal council. And you know, like, so it's great if they lose. So I not only am I not going to like throw the challenge, like I actively really want us to win is the first part. The second part is like, if we lose, I'm not going to be a tribal council, but I don't want to freak you guys out. Like this is a twist again that's only good for the next tribal council that has to be played well before a vote so people again can respond to it. And you don't want to ruffle feathers. So the best thing to do would just be like, hey guys, I'm taking myself out of tribal council. Does anyone else want to leave? Like that would be the most congenial way to play it. And you might as well just land on the beach and be like, I am staying here. And the way I can prove it is the twist is that I have this advantage. And here are the ways I would play it both ways. And that just shows how much I don't have like a nefarious purpose here. But I guess maybe that again is me trying to get into Rich's mind where maybe he hasn't thought about this as much as I have.
No, I think Rich looked at its surface level and said, oh, this is money in the bank. I mean, once he was able to actually read the advantage itself without stumbling over his words. But once he was able to be like,
brain. He's on the Brains tribe.
Yeah, he's like, oh, okay, fantastic. And now I also like not to make fun of Rich. Like that, I think there's just a very objectively funny moment. And more people stumble over their words reading these things than you may think. Again, editing is a master class. But I do think that I imagine he just saw it as simply as like, well, I'm safe no matter what. Either I win through immunity or I just send myself out of tribal council. So like, I'm just going to stay out of the fray and observe and see what's happening. When to your point, I think maybe a more active player would be somebody to say like, all right, let's use this to engender trust, to try to make some cross-tribal bonds as well. Because look, we don't know if a swap's coming, but we know a merge is coming certainly at some point. And so I want to be one of the most powerfully connected people in the game. To your point about production, maybe it was something where like you're not allowed to open the scroll or talk about it until after the immunity challenge. I also have a question about
I would hate that. I really don't want production to control the information people can give. And I don't know. I mean, I can't say that because I don't think Rich would think to tell them. So I don't think so. I don't know.
I do have a question about what we call it, like safeties without power, if we want to pluralize it. But
safety without powers, or we're not doing this again.
No,
I'm not doing this grammar thing again. But it is safeties without power. But I'm not doing it again. I'm not doing the grammar thing again.
But can the player determine the timing of it? Like it seemed JLP prompted it, but like we saw, for example, Baden, use it at a certain point in Champions versus Contenders, and we saw Jeremy in Winners of War like immediately.
Wasn't it Luke?
Or no, it was Luke. Yeah, sorry, Luke used it on Baden. But we saw like Jeremy immediately nope at a tribal council. Do the safety without power holders have the power to be like, I'm going to do it at this specific time? And if so, do you think there is an ideal time to use this power in like the chronology of a tribal council evening?
I don't, because I think it creates the chronology. Like, it's not like tribal council is an hour. Do it at 59 minutes so they can't talk. Like, if you do it at 59 minutes, they will talk for another 30 minutes. Like, the fact that they'll always have more time to discuss, it means that's why something like this is like, it doesn't have to be super secretive because the other side will always have a chance to respond to it. So you might as well just tell them whenever. But like, I get for Max, like, yeah, sure, go tell the other side the wrong thing just so that they can't plan all day. But like, again, if you're concerned about like any leaks in your side, or if that was like a reason for any secrecy, there's no point of being that precious about it because they are going to know at a point where they can then start talking about it at tribal council.
Well, then if that's the case, if we do feel like kind of the clock resets and like they just let them talk for however long, then play it as soon as possible. Like, why?
Well, they might have to like talk a bit.
Yeah, but I would say if you had the choice, like, why provide even more time for people to talk, possibly suss out your plan? Like, if the idea is to catch them off guard and to provide the shortest window possible to get done what you need done, then shorten that window by immediately doing it and then being like, all right, then they'll talk it out and then immediately get to the vote, rather than being like, okay, we'll have our first talk and then we'll play it and then have our second breakfast. And then we'll have another talk on top of that.
I bet production wants that. I bet production is like, doesn't want them to lose the first.
Yeah, they're like, we got hour 15-minute episodes.
Yeah, exactly. I do think so. So looking ahead at the swap, it is interesting because I feel like Brawn might be like a little too cohesive, and that would be kind of upsetting because the Brains are bringing it.
Yeah, because
Obviously,
the
yeah,
only thing we know of in terms of dynamics now are like the friends of Nash, right? That it was Petey, Kristen, and Ursula that were like kind of perceived as in his group, but I don't know if that automatically puts them on the outs of anything. Like this is what
yeah.
happens when a tribe. Sometimes when a tribe doesn't go to tribal council for a while, you get like a Timbira or a Galoo where it's just fractured AF. This is the opposite. Where like they got rid of
They patched
their
it.
like universal enemy, and now it just seems like they're pretty kumbaya right now.
Yeah, so it's like there's definitely a majority of 6 bronze, which is already the biggest group in the game, which is Noonan, Paulie, Kate, Morgan, Jesse, and Bed, and then probably Kristen and Petey, and then maybe even Ursula. Like the only small dissension we see from a tribe we barely get anything from is possibly like an Ursula issue with like a Noonan et al.
Mhm.
So that might be an issue. And then obviously then from the Brains we have now like Rich, Laura, Logan, and Max, and that's already that might be over before it's begun in terms of the way the working relationship. And then we obviously have the graduates, which is the 5 of Miles, Kaylin, Zara, Karen, and AJ. So like I'm interested in how it will go. I would hate for like these cut up brains to be put together with Brawn, who we don't know or really care about,
Right.
and then just get like pagonged because they just don't have enough numbers. So I'm just a little worried about that. Obviously, like great episode for Paulie, like a lot more investment into Paulie. Paulie and
Yeah.
Noonan, we get it. They are our hero on Brawn. Everyone else, I'm a little bit less connected to. So I want the graduates at least to do well. Paulie and Noonan to do well. Logan, I obviously love from the other side as well. Laura, so that's kind of where I'm seeing it. But I just hope that it's not just like imagine if it's just like a steamroll of like Kate, Morgan, Jesse, Ben, Petey, and Kristen on a trial. Like that would be a very unfortunate state of affairs.
And that's the tough thing as well, is as much as we can suss out these circumstances, a lot is going to be dependent on what the tribe shakedown
Yeah.
is, not only of what the numbers are of Brains versus Brawn, but also who is with whom as well. Like if you have Max and Miles on a tribe together,
No,
they're
I don't
not
think
going to,
that'll go well.
even if it's like 6 Brains and 1 Brawn, they're going to be like, nope,
Yes.
we're gonna bring you in. We're gonna take each other out. So like it's a lot of this is up in the air. Let me take your temperature on something else, Shannon, as well before we move into the Chizy, because we're a quarter of the way through the season.
Yeah, crazy.
Who's on your short list for winner candidates right now? I think a couple of the names you mentioned are definitely up there for me.
Yeah, I think just all the people I just said, the people I care about. From Brawn, Paulie, Noonan.
I think
Yep.
that's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Everyone else is so irrelevant. And that's the thing that's really hard is like I usually say like if you lose reward and win immunity, we don't hear from you. But they have been winning reward. But I feel like again we just get way more focus on the heroes, which is Paulie and Noonan. Or we had like they won reward, but they brought Ali, and then the focus was on everything Ali was doing, so we didn't get
Yeah.
a lot of Brawn. So
And
we just haven't
even so,
seen
we
them a
got
lot.
like the only reaction we got in confessional was from Noonan.
Right. So Paulie and Noonan are way up there. In terms of winning candidates, because it feels like if it's not them, it's a brain, which is crazy at this point, given the way that it's gone for the brains. Paulie maybe is my winner candidate right now.
Yeah.
From an edit perspective and game perspective, and it's a lot of game to play. And then from an edit and game perspective, from the brains, again, the brains are all in a worse position, but I would say Laura, Logan, Miles.
Miles. Maybe
Is
AJ?
that it? Maybe AJ, who was introduced late, but has certainly like had a great coming out week. Well, I mean, it was a bad episode 3, and he came out there, but then it's been a good week since. Kaylin, I mean, like I
No,
got a message on Twitter about the fact that they're like, well, they went out of their way to introduce Kaylin. They've gone out of their way to introduce
that's
the fact that
true.
he's playing it up, and they
Like a
they
little
don't
bit of like the a
understand.
little bit like the Alec Gabler stuff of like, here's a random meaningful confessional of like, okay, if you're not going to see me for the next few episodes, just know this is what I'm
Yeah,
trying
just
to
know I'm
do.
here. Yeah, so I think maybe someone like Kaylin, like they are caring for us to be invested in him. Like they care enough to do that. And then also they've always shown like they haven't let us think at any point that he is the puppet that everyone else thinks he is. Like we've always known his
Yeah.
MO. Possibly it's a B tier, but like maybe Zara came in too late. Karen, what about Karen? Karen maybe?
I think Karen has always been like a very stable force. She got obviously that personal content in the beginning due to her job. I could see it. Again, Australian Survivor editing is so weird. I feel like it's changed actually. I think it really depends on the person who's winning. I think you're not going to get your typical. I say with one hand, looking at someone like Pia Miranda, who had like a very obvious winners
Yes.
edit just because she had like some stuff in the beginning. But I feel like, look at the differences of a Mark Wales versus like Liz. where Liz had a little bit more of an understated, consistent edit. Mark obviously was like one of the bigger characters of the season, and I think it was just due to the position that they occupied. So I'm looking more so for like, I guess, consistency than I am like, oh my god, how much are we seeing of them? And I think we've seen a consistent amount of Karin as well. It helps that her tribe
Yeah.
went to tribal council in 4 out of 6 episodes too.
I would put Karin over AJ.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I hope this doesn't play out in a way that's negative for the season, that we're already ruling so many people out.
That's the Australian Survivor in a nutshell, though.
That's pretty bad, though. Is it always this bad? I can't even
I mean,
remember right now. Maybe.
yeah, I feel like it was oh, I mean, it depends because like
Yeah.
both tribes were such hot messes in Titans v Rebels that we got to know a lot about each of them. Again, Braun, it's just due to the fact that so many of them have been under the radar so far that like you kind of have to discount a lot of them.
This reminds me a lot of it was worse in the first Brains vs Brawn season, to the point where like there was
Yes.
4 characters, but like, or it was like Emmett, Danny, not even Flick. Flick couldn't even win. They didn't edit her well. They didn't give her enough, and she should have been a really viable winner contender as 3rd place, who was close to winning.
It was
And
one
then like
immunity
Haley,
challenge away, arguably, from
yeah,
winning the season.
exactly. Then definitely, and then Haley and George, to the point where I always remember the episode after Haley came back from being voted out. My brother was like, she's the only viable winner contender, and she just got voted out of the game. And it's still so obvious. So, and I still love that season, but it's definitely a knock against it. So that's probably something to look at, because it feels like they're going down a similar path. Chizy?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Take it away, Jacob Sager Weinstein and MC Color.
1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 3, 1, 1, 3. It's getting kind of chizzy. 3, 2, 1.
Also, can I just say, the marketing, well, if we're talking about like winner edits where like it's almost spoiled by how few people can win, the marketing, like every single episode, like even for the twist, they were like the big twist tonight, and I was like, don't do that. I know that they're trying to get people to watch. I understand the ratings up, but like, oh my god, like don't look at the social media page. Like, and I don't want to like, I think the social media team has done a great job this season, but
Yeah.
like every single episode, it's like Brains tribe, like every tribe that's going to tribal council is the marketing focus.
Yeah, I mean,
On that
episode
day.
3, I remember very specifically was like, it's Kent versus Miles. It's like, well, all right, I guess we know what the storyline's going to be for the latter half of the episode.
Yes, it's not in a good place. Like the immunity challenges are great and too long to be told by the marketing department who's going to win 3 hours before the episode.
I love that word puzzle of Logan. What did she say? Like, a brain will become a brawn.
Yeah, that wasn't it. The challenges have been really fun.
They've
Like
been
last
so
week,
good.
yeah, the water puzzle was great. I love the fire challenge. I think we've had this. Look at the diversity of challenges we've had this week alone, with like the reward challenge where they were standing on the pegs, and the soccer challenge, and it's just the much. I really just 10 out of 10.
Incredible. I mean, even something as small as like changing out what you throw at the targets, which has been our usual like ender of these challenges, of like the mud, of making the mud balls and doing like, even that small change is enough variation to kind of like make my eyebrows raise a little bit, as opposed like that's what shows in the challenge department, of like even just making small tweaks can make people feel like it's not as sort of like rote and familiar as the routines that we're used to.
Yeah, it was great. Anyway, back to what I usually talk about, not the challenges, but the Chizy. We've spoken about it. Really, you want to give to, you'd love to give to, all of the graduates. I'm going to give 3 to Kaylin as the secret swing, who I think did so well. I think it was a good decision. And I think the fact that he was so secret makes, not that I can even, like, maybe it's on Max, maybe it's not on Kaylin, but the fact that Max thinks he has the numbers so sewn up that he sends out one of his own numbers, I mean, that is a secret swing that he doesn't even doubt for a second that he has the numbers regardless. Like, it's arrogance, but we got to credit Kaylin to a degree. 2 to Miles, who won the war, got Kaylin over, wasn't a viable target because of that relationship that they've both built, and it's so cathartic, and like, go Miles. And 1 to AJ as well in winning the war, for how much Max was protecting him when it was not reciprocated, for not playing the idol in that tense moment. Would love to give to Karin and Zara, who I really love that they jumped ship. It was the right thing. They found a great alliance of comfort. But I only have 6 points to give. I would love to give more, but I hope you give them points, Mike.
Yeah, so this is interesting. I love the chance to do this with you weekly. One of them being that, like, so far you and I are very divergent in giving out these Chizy points, which is great as well. So I will give 1 point to Kaylin, because I wanted to acknowledge the role that he played. Again, while he did make a choice, I just feel like a lot of these points for me are going to be determined by the edit, and I think that it seemed like maybe he was able to make a much easier decision by Miles ended up being on the block. But I did want to acknowledge the fact that, like, there's a reason why everyone thought they had him. Like, that speaks to the perception he was playing up, as well as
Yeah.
the relationships that he was able to broker on all sides. I actually am giving 2 points to Karin.
Great.
And for a couple reasons. I guess it's one
really
because
glad.
of what's happening with the graduates, but I also, because I was debating between her and Zara, unlike Zara, she does not get targeted. Her name was not floated out there. She was,
Yeah.
again, half the tribe had their names thrown out at one point in this episode. She is one of the select few who did not. I'm actually trying to think. Yeah, I guess her, Laura, and Logan and Kaylin were the only 4 who did not have their name get
Yeah,
suggested as a
AJ
target.
did,
Well,
Miles
yeah, Miles
did,
did, Allie,
Max at
Zara.
different times. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, she was able to succeed in that. And I also wanted to give her kudos for what she did in the reward challenge when she is in this very heavily advertised tussle with, with Morgan. I will say it was
With
also, like,
Ursula.
yeah, like, very strenuous as well. Like,
Yeah.
absolutely killer. Kudos to both women. But her looking that entanglement and saying, like, by the way, don't trust Rich at all. And, like, being able to do what Allie should have done, which is, like, you can spread this information, but do it much more exclusively rather than broadcasting it to everybody at all times. I thought she took advantage of, like, a very fun moment. And there's also just the incredible sequence of, like, her spilling the tea on Rich and then just going, ah! They're just, like, trying to throw her over the edge.
Yeah.
It was so good. I've been really impressed by her, and I'm glad that now she's, like, finding her own power. And I'm giving 3 to Miles. Like, yes, theoretically, if you look at the vote count, he was 1 vote away from going. But again, from what the edit was showing, it seemed like he was the one that was really helping pull all this together. He was the one that was vocalizing the edit, being like, and these are the people that I want to work with. And it shows the strength of his alliance that as soon as Max makes this public call out, all 3 of them immediately look to Miles and say, yeah, that's not happening. We're making sure that you're staying in the game. It also seems like through the edit, he was the one that personally went to Kaylin to make sure that they were locked in. So again, I'm sure that AJ, I'm sure that Zara, I'm sure that Karin contributed a lot to making sure this foursome stays cohesive. But Miles was the one, to me, that was being portrayed as the one that was making sure everything stayed cobbled together. And so I got to give him kudos in what was a very, very strong week for him. He proved himself in challenges. He proved himself in strategy and social aspects. And I think he's actually looking in a very good position going into the swap, I say, before he probably gets completely swap screwed.
Well, we'll look at the chili charts on the feedback show with Nikai Danza, but like this is Survivor, Mike. Like this is like, what is this show still on? Yeah. 25 years in, yes. Because sometimes the plucky underdog who's getting like severely beaten down and being called a rat in front of everyone finds his people and comes over the top, even in the face of a really big advantage that gets misplayed in an insane way, and then they win, and it's just so good. And this is what Survivor is about. And I'm just so happy to talk about it with you. What a great joy for me.
I am so happy. Again, this season has been so much fun. Again, in the way that I loved Big Brother 26, which was like, it's entertaining sometimes to have like very high level 4D chess dominant gameplay to get to suss this over with you. But sometimes it's just fun to like have people try things and massively mess it up. And suffice it to say, a quarter way through the season, that has been the guiding principle of it and has led to just me staring jaw agape at some of these decisions that people are making. But the important thing to me is that they're making decisions. That's what I want to see, especially in Australian Survivor, where it is a long game. People are trying things. They are almost always failing, but God, it is so much fun to watch, so much fun to talk about. I'll be intrigued to see, again, what the swap does, because I do feel like at this moment, both tribes have kind of coalesced into a new normal. So I'm glad to hopefully shake that up and be able to then make a new normal, not a new normal, and see what the next little phase is going to be before we go to the merge and it all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, well, yesterday was my second favorite episode of the season, and today was my favorite. So we're on a really good track, and I've enjoyed the whole thing. So really happy with the trajectory that we're on as well. Mike, where can people find what you're doing?
At a Mike Bloom type, and there's a lot going on. So obviously, the time this is being released, we're 36 hours just about away from the American premiere of US Survivor Season 48. So if you want to check it out, I've got everything you need to know, interviews with all the cast, tribe breakdowns with Rob in written and podcast form. Plenty more there, because I also got the chance to go out onto set, and so I'll reveal a lot of behind-the-scenes details as the episode airs about what you may have missed. I have a sit-down with Jeff that happened on the island right after the first tribal council, and of course, Exit Press and the B&B. The other big thing is the Reality Flash. Lord, when it rains, it pours when it comes to reality TV news. I put out a triple header, a back-to-back-to-back series of news items on Friday. I had a bunch of like sort of blind miscellaneous items, including one Survivor connection that we could get into. And then obviously the big news coming to the US Survivor world Saturday night, which was Survivor 50 in the hands of the fans, much like Rich's advantage was in Max's hands of being able to vote on key production elements. I reported on it. I gave my thoughts on it. And then Sunday, I don't know if you saw this, Shannon, big expose on yet another toxic, problematic element of The Bachelor behind the scenes. And so I brought Haley Strong on to break down what it means and what it could mean going forward. So suffice it to say, there's a lot going on out there. There'll be plenty more as well. Whenever I see another big piece of news, that'll be in your eyes and ears at therealityflash.com. And otherwise, Shannon, I guess same time next week, right? 3 more episodes next week?
Yes, I know. So excited. Well, follow me at Shannon Gates. Yes, with 48 coming up, it's going to be a lot more even podcasts. We have obviously the daily Australian Survivor recaps, and then we have the feedback show with Nikai Dancer. And then we're going to have an X interview with Nash. I didn't say it yesterday because I was like, I knew my X interview was with Nash, but then I was like, does that make it seem like we don't lose anyone big tonight?
Mm-hmm.
But Nash was a big character. So anyway, whatever. Nash is the exit interview, and we're doing that. 1 exit interview a week. And then 48 coverage. We have the draft, and then this week I'm going to have Mark Warnock on for my Survivor Global premiere. So that's happening. WeKnowGlobalSurvivor.com at Shannon Gates for all of that. Mike, this was a great time. I love you. I love Survivor. I love life. I'm so happy. Thank you all. Thank you to all team behind the scenes. Thank you, Mike. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.